Hi everyone, I am so delighted to talk to you once again through this video. How are you children? Well, in the last video, you learned about power sharing in Belgium. Now today, we are going to learn power sharing in Sri Lanka. In the last video, you learned that Belgian government had resolved the social conflict in a wonderful way. They succeeded in averting civil war in Belgium. The Belgian government respected the feelings of French community and powers are distributed among various bodies. That is why they were successful in preventing civil war in Belgium because power sharing played a major role in Belgium and peace was established there in Belgium. And now let us discuss about the power sharing in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is an island nation having a population of 2 crores. It is in the Indian Ocean, which is very close to the coast of Tamil Nadu. And it is smaller than our Indian state Haryana. Sri Lanka has a diverse population. The major social groups are Sinhala speakers, 74%, and Tamil speaking people, 18%. In Sri Lanka, the Sinhala community enjoyed the bigger majority and imposed its will on the entire country. In Sri Lanka, we see two different communities. They are Sinhalas and Tamils. In Tamils, there are two subgroups. They are number one, Sri Lankan Tamils, number two, Indian Tamils. Sri Lankan Tamils are the native Tamils of Sri Lanka, and Indian Tamils are the people who had migrated to Sri Lanka some years ago. Particularly, they went to Sri Lanka as migrant laborers to work in tea garden, coffee garden, and as rubber plantation workers. That is why here they are migrated in the northern and eastern province of Sri Lanka. Please look at the map here. There you can see all the Tamils lived in northern and eastern provinces of Sri Lanka. But here the Sri Lankan government showed some partiality. They showed discrimination against Tamils. That's why the problem arose between these two communities in Sri Lanka. Majoritarianism in Sri Lanka. The government followed preferential policies that favored Sinhala applicants for university positions and government jobs. But here the Sri Lankan government gave jobs only to the native Sri Lankans, but they did not offer any jobs to the Tamils. So they showed discrimination against the Tamil people. And this increased the feeling of alienation among the Sri Lankan Tamils. Sri Lankan Tamils felt that constitution and government policies denied their equal political rights, discriminated against them in getting jobs, other opportunities, and ignored their interests. And here, the interests of the Tamil people were totally ignored by the Sri Lankan government. So they demanded provincial authority. They demanded equality, but all their demands were denied by the Sri Lankan government, due to which the relationship between Sinhala and Tamil communities became poor. Sri Lankan Tamils launched a struggle for the recognition of Tamil as an official language. They demanded regional autonomy and equal opportunities. Dear children, in the year 1956, the Sri Lankan government passed a law to recognize Sinhala language as an official language in Sri Lanka. That is why the Tamils brought pressure over the Sri Lankan government to recognize Tamil language as an official language. And here the problem started between the Sri Lankans and Tamils. Here, why is power sharing so important? Power sharing is a good way to ensure the stability of political order. In Sri Lanka, the Sri Lankan government did not like to share the powers. That is why the problem arose between these two communities. They did not like to share their powers. So since they had the majority in the government, they made all the policies which are only favorable to the Sri Lankans. So Tamils were totally neglected. Therefore, the Tamil people felt that they were ignored and they were humiliated. For this very reason, this led to conflict between Sri Lankans and Tamils. And some of the Tamil groups started a struggle in Sri Lanka, and especially LTT, an organization was started by Tamils in Sri Lanka, and in 1980s the struggle started and it ended. It continued till 2009. So it was a big civil war in which thousands of people were killed and massacred. Losses were so heavy, and losses were heavy on both sides. Thousands of people were killed on both sides. So social life, economic life was crippled. So Sri Lankan government faced a lot of economic losses due to this civil war. More than 2 decades the war went on. So during this period, the people suffered a lot. So the Tamil terrorist organization LTT planted bombs in trains. As a result, so many innocent people were brutally killed in those bomb blasts. So at last, in 2009, the problem came to an end with the killing of its leader, Prabhakaran. So why this problem arose? Because the Sri Lankan government did not like to share the power with the minorities. But whereas in Belgium, in the last video you learned, in Belgium, the Belgian government shared the powers with minority French people. That is why the peace was restored there, and there was no question of civil war in Belgium. But whereas in case of Sri Lanka, the Sri Lankan government did not like to share the powers with the minority group. That is why the war went on, the civil war went on more than 2 decades, my dear children. So many people were killed. Losses were heavy on both sides. But anyhow, that came to an end in the year 2009. It is because of power sharing, because the Sri Lankan government did not share the power with the minority community. So as a result, why the war went on like that in Sri Lanka? Because power is not shared with the community groups or other social groups in Sri Lanka. Now, let me tell you why is power sharing so important. Power sharing is good. It is a good way to ensure the stability of political order. When power is shared among the different organizations, and definitely we can see political order. But in the absence of political sharing, we cannot see political order. So power sharing is a good way to ensure the stability of political order. Power sharing is good because it helps to reduce the possibility of conflict between the social groups. In Belgium, they succeeded. But whereas in Sri Lanka, since they did not share the power with the minority community, that led to civil war in Sri Lanka. Social groups often lead to violence and political instability. Definitely, social groups often lead to violence and political instability. So, power sharing is the very spirit of it, the very spirit of democracy. Especially the democracy says it is the people's government. Professor Seeley, an eminent political thinker, says democracy is a government in which everybody has a share. Yes, every individual, every citizen in a democracy enjoys the share, and that is the noted feature of democracy. So, power sharing is the very spirit of democracy. But unfortunately, in Sri Lanka, that is totally absent. So, power share, there is no scope for power sharing in Sri Lanka. So, power sharing is the very spirit of democracy. People have a right to be consulted on how they are to be governed. Now, let me tell you about the forms of power sharing. Now, power sharing is of two types, my dear. They are horizontal distribution of power and vertical division of power. Now, let me tell you about the horizontal distribution of power. Power is shared among different organs of government. In the last video, I made known to you how the powers are distributed among the organs, and I told you what are they. Actually, power is shared among different organs of government, such as legislative, executive, and judiciary. So, power is equally shared among these organs. And this arrangement is called horizontal distribution of power. Look at the diagram here, my dear children. Horizontal sharing of power. You see, first one, legislature, and the second one, executive, and the third organ, judiciary. Already I told you the duties of each and every organ in the last video. So here, in the horizontal sharing of power, power is equally distributed among these three organs: legislature, executive, judiciary. So this is called horizontal sharing of power. So this arrangement is called horizontal distribution of power. Each organ checks the others. So this arrangement is also called as a system of checks and balances. Since it checks the other organs, it is also called as system of checks and balances. So that is the first kind of horizontal distribution of power. And second one, vertical distribution of power. Power is shared among the different levels of government, such as center, state, and local government. Look at the diagram here on the right side. So here you can see the power is distributed among the government at various levels. So in this diagram you see power is distributed among the governments at various levels. Three types of governments that you are looking here. Union government at the top, next state government, and at the bottom you can see the local government. So these are the three types of governments. At various levels, the power is distributed here. That's why it is called vertical division of power. So power is shared among different levels of government, such as central government or union government, state government, and local government. See, for example, in the union government, the central government enjoys more powers rather than the state government and local governments. And state governments here derive some powers from the central government according to the constitution. And again, at the bottom level, we see the local governments. They are also called local self-governments. So here powers are equally distributed at various levels among these governments. Union government at the top, state government, and lastly local governments. So that is why, my dear children, whenever the powers are distributed, whenever the powers are equally shared, then no conflict, no problem will arise. Because today all the nations are democratic countries. Most of the countries today are democratic countries. So in democracy, generally powers are equally shared by different organs or bodies in the government. So that is why whenever the power is not shared properly, so many group conflicts will arise, and those conflicts will lead to civil wars in the nation. That's why all these come under forms of power sharing, my dear. So power sharing, that's the lesson you have learnt, my dear children. So go through the textbook and read diligently every chapter, and I will give you some questions over this chapter, and you can send your answers. I will send my questions to you. You can answer, okay? Read through the textbook and follow it, okay? That is the end of the lesson, power sharing.